Okay, Easter is just around the corner, and for a lot of people that means chocolate, but for me it means hot cross buns. So hot cross buns, in fact sourdough hot cross buns, that's what we're going to be making today. I absolutely love these, perfect for Easter, but you can eat them all year round if you just make them as a toasted tea cake without the cross on top. Also, if you haven't got a sourdough starter, you can still follow this recipe, but just omit the sourdough and use about 4 grams of instant yeast instead. You should be able to then follow the process and the timings as I give them to you. Things might move a little bit quicker with the instant yeast, so just keep an eye on it. But 4 grams, you should pretty much be in line with what we're doing. So for the recipe, you're going to need 200 grams of strong white bread flour, 200 grams of wholemeal flour, and in fact I'm using this Kamut flour. It's like an ancient grain. I find it's got a slightly semolina-y, almost chestnut flavour to it, which I really like, perfect for this recipe. But we're going to cut that with 100 grams of all-purpose plain flour. If you use all bread flour for this, you'll find the final hot cross buns have a kind of spongy chewiness to them, which you might like. It's a little bit like a crumpet. So I'm just using a bit of all-purpose flour to combat that. Then you're going to need 100 grams of sourdough starter, 50 grams of caster sugar, 11 grams of salt, 50 grams of butter, 200 grams of whole milk, 100 grams of water, and then we're going to be, and 1 egg, and then we're going to be flavouring these the classic way. I'm not interested in chocolate in my hot cross buns. I like to keep it totally traditional, so I'm going to be using 100 grams of sultanas, the zest of an orange. This is really important. Such a big part of the flavour, so a nice fresh orange, and then a mix of spices. So this is something you can experiment with. It's part of the fun. Just pick the spices you like the most. I'm using these 3, so I'm going to be using a bit of nutmeg, a bit of ginger, and quite a good amount of cinnamon. That's one of my favourites. So, also going to be using the KitchenAid. I guess you could make these by hand, but it's going to be a little bit hard working things in, like the butter and the egg. It's all going to get pretty sloppy and sticky. If you haven't got a KitchenAid, then I'd probably suggest just mixing everything together in one go to start with. But with the KitchenAid, we are going to add our flours, basically our flours, our starter, our liquids and the sugar, and we're going to mix that together and then leave it sort of a pre-mix method. So we're not doing an auto-lease, we're going to be mixing all those ingredients together and leaving that for about an hour. So let's just get these weighed out. So that's 200 of that. Then add 100 of that. So basically that's 500 grams of flour in total. There we go. To that add the liquids. So like I say, 200 grams of milk, 100 of water. I'm going to add the sugar now, so 50 grams of sugar. That's sort of enough sugar to help feed the starter. It won't be fighting it. So I'd get it in now, and it's just going to help boost everything along. And we'll get our 100 grams of starter in. Here it comes. Perfect. So into the mixer, and you want to mix that for about 3 minutes. You want to get that incorporated and get the gluten developing a bit, but then like I say, we're going to leave it for an hour, so just give this a quick mix. Okay, there we go. So that's had about 3 minutes. As you can see, it's a fairly stiff dough at this stage. We've still got an egg to go in, so that's going to loosen things up a bit. But that is what your dough looks like. So now we're just going to leave that in there, cover it with a tea towel, preferably a high quality Buzzby Bakes sourdough inspired tea towel. But if you haven't got one of them, shame on you. But if you haven't, any tea towel will do, but this will give you slightly better results. So cover that with a tea towel and now just leave that for an hour, and then we're going to finish off our mixing by adding the rest of the ingredients. Okay, so that's been an hour. It's been a little bit under for me, but you do want to leave it for the full hour. So we'll take the tea towel off, and now we can add the remainder of our ingredients and give it its second mix. So the dough is still looking pretty solid like that. You should notice it's just started to, I mean, it won't have puffed up, but you should just notice it's got some life to it. And also during the next mix, you'll see that it's got a slightly foamier feel to it than just a plain freshly mixed dough. So to this we want to add our egg. There we go. Then the 11 grams of salt, like that. Then 50 grams of butter that's just sort of soft at room temperature. And then the zest of the orange. So I like to go for the whole zest. There we go. Oh, blimey. And now, the fun part, your spice mix. This is sort of really the pleasure of making your own hot cross buns. I like to use nutmeg, ginger and cinnamon, so I'm going to add about half a teaspoon of the nutmeg, about that much. If you weighed these, I think it works out about 2 grams of nutmeg, 3 grams of ginger, but again another half teaspoon, and then about 3 or 4 grams of cinnamon, or 1 sort of full teaspoon, 1 heaped teaspoon. But I do like my cinnamon. So that goes in. So the only thing we've got left is the sultanas, but we're going to put them in at the end of the mix so they don't get smashed up and sort of blended into the dough. So onto the mixer. And now mix this for about 3 minutes. When you first switch it on, because you've got the egg in there, it's going to kind of lubricate the sides of the bowls and the dough will just sort of spin around. But as it mixes in and starts to get some traction on the side of the bowl, then it really will start to incorporate. So about 3 minutes, but it sort of depends how long it is before it gets to that stage where it's mixing. So 3 to 5 minutes. You can hear it's just sliding around. Move my nice tea towel out of the way. Okay, that's been about a minute, and I'll just show you. You can still see that it's not really incorporated. I've still got a big wad of butter stuck on the side there. It's all looking very messy, but we've reached the point where it's starting to stick to the bowl. So now, from here, about 3 minutes, we'll really get everything fully incorporated. There we go, look, that's been about another minute, and as you can see, now it has come together into one sort of shaggy mass. So we'll just carry on mixing that. Like I said, it'll be about another 2 minutes, and that should be smooth and nice and homogenized. Okay, there we go, so that's come together nicely. You can see it's looking smoother now, not as sticky. So now we just want to add these sultanas. In they all go, and now you just want to mix that for maybe 30 seconds to a minute, just to get them nicely dispersed throughout that dough. So just on a #1 speed for this. There we go, you can see the sultanas are all the way through it, so we'll just scrape that off the dough hook now. There we go. Bring it all together into a ball in the middle as usual. Like that, doesn't have to be too neat. Now grab your Buzzby Baked sourdough inspired half Panama high quality cotton tea towel, or your regular one if you haven't got one. Cover it, and now we're going to let that bulk proof at room temperature for about 4 to 5 hours. Okay, so that's been 4 hours. We are now ready to divide and shape this. You will need a baking tray covered with baking parchment and a little bit of flour, or I'm going to be using some rice flour just to stop it sticking, but it's not too sticky. You can see it's puffed up a bit. We've kind of got that dome shape to it, but like I say, it's not going to be full of gas because we've got to shape these quite rigorously. So a little bit of flour, not too much, because we're going to need the traction of the worktop to be able to get a good round shape on these. So just pull the dough out. There we go. See, it's quite a firm dough. And now we want to divide this into 12 buns. So I think, I just need to grab my scales. There we go. I think about 100 grams each should probably do it. About 107, that's fine. So I'll just dust a little bit of flour there so I can stack all these up. There we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So I'm just going to trim off about 10 grams from each of these. Okay, that's fine. So, starting with one that's easy, just stretch it out a bit. That's your smooth side, so that was kind of the top that was doming over. So that goes down onto the worktop. Then you just want to fold all the sides around. If you put your thumb in the middle, you can kind of pull them over your thumb till you've got a tight ball. It looks a little bit like a dumpling. Turn that over, and now you need to use the back of your hand to kind of push the roll down and create some tension at the front, and then you're going to use the side of your hand to pull it back, and you'll get a circular motion going. So like this, pushing down with your heel of your palm, and then the fingers coming underneath, and you end up with a really nice round ball. I'll do another one there. In, flip it over, palm of the hand, pushing, rolling. There we go. Next one. In, flip it over. So you're really just trying to push it and build up tension, and then you're just rotating it. It takes a little bit of practice, but when you get it, it's a good feeling, and they come out really nice and round. So we'll just whiz through these. And there we go, really nice round ball. You can see all the seams have kind of tucked together in a little vortex on the bottom. So that goes there. Because we've got the flour, you see, we can just rejig these. You want them about 1 centimetre apart, something like that. And now you need to let these proof at room temperature for at least 2 hours, but you can easily push that up to 4 hours. And you want to see them grown enough so they start to touch, because we want these all to bake into each other, so you've got to tear them apart afterwards, and also it's going to help us when we put our crosses on. So check them after 2 hours, but like I say, pretty forgiving. push them to 3, 4, they'll just continue to get lighter. We're not looking for a sort of irregular crumb inside, we're just looking for a nice light crumb. So really push that final proof and make sure you're not serving up dense hot cross buns. So once again, cover them with your high quality tea towel, and like I say, 2 to 4 hours. Okay then, so that's been about 3 hours. Let's have a little peek under our high quality luxury Buzzby Bakes design tea towel. You want to get yourself one of them. Let's have a little look. They've puffed up nicely. It's quite chilly in the house actually, only about 17 degrees, so things are moving quite slowly. It'd be quite nice if these had proofed into each other. They have along the vertical, but not the horizontal, but that's going to be fine. If you had longer, leave them till they're just touching, but they should still bake together once we get them in the oven. So before we get them in the oven though, we want to get our crosses on them. So like I say, you could bake these any time of the year just like that, but as it's Easter, we will follow tradition. So in a bowl I've got 50 grams of plain white flour, and to that I'm just going to add 60 grams of water. So just over 100% hydration will give you a nice kind of pipeable batter to do your crosses. So we'll just mix that in. You want it nice and smooth. There we go, just like that, nice and smooth. Now we want to get that into a piping bag, or if you haven't got a piping bag you can just use a freezer bag and snip the little corner off. So get that in there. Always a little bit tricky when you're doing it by yourself, but I think that should just work. There we go. Okay, and now you're going to pipe the crosses on. Now it's not a case of piping individual crosses on each one. We're just going to do long lines, so you're kind of making a grid all the way along, up and down. And you want to keep the crosses fairly thin. It's only flour and water, so there's no leavening agent in there. They're not going to puff up. So if you have them too thick, they're going to be sort of quite dry, dense and chewy. So keep them thin and they'll be fine. So maybe just cut off like a 5mm hole on the top. And then like I say, a nice smooth line all the way along, starting on the paper and going all the way off from the other end. Turn the tray. There we go. And now we can get them in the oven. So you could bake them just like that, as you would do with your sort of standard loaf of bread. Have a baking tray or a roasting pan in the bottom of the oven. Put these in the oven at 200 degrees. Put a cup of water in the baking tray to generate some steam, and then cook them for about 20 minutes, turning them regularly so they brown all over. Or what I tend to do, like I do with the ciabatta, is I will cover these to create a little steamy environment and bake them for about 15 minutes. Then I'll take that off and continue cooking them for another 10 minutes. If you're doing it that way, have your oven set to about 230 degrees Celsius, so a bit hotter whilst they're covered, and then turn it down to 200 for that final 10 minutes. Have a look at them. You want a good bit of colour on there because that's how you're going to get the definition between the bun and the cross. So if it's all looking a little bit pale and anemic, just turn the heat up and give them another couple of minutes. So I'm going to get these in and I'll show you the last stage of these hot cross buns. Alright then, there we have it. Let's just switch that off. They're cooked, so 25 minutes in total. We've got a good bit of colour on them. My oven has two terrible hotspots on the corner, so these ones always get a little bit dark, so it's kind of a balancing act. But the final thing is just to glaze your buns. So what I do for that is, in a pot I've just got 1 heaped tablespoon of marmalade with a teaspoon of boiling water. Just mix that down to loosen it up and dissolve the marmalade. If it doesn't quite fully dissolve, don't worry about it, because these buns are piping hot from the oven, so it's going to kind of sizzle when you put it on. And this is going to give the buns a nice shine, but it'll also just soften up the crust of the end, because you want kind of nice squidgy buns. So we'll give them a good generous glazing. There we go. So yeah, once we've got them nice and covered, they look lovely. That brings out the cross again as well. So now you want to let these cool a bit before you eat them. Even if you want to serve them warm, still allow them to cool for maybe 15-20 minutes, just so that crumb can set a bit inside and you don't have that kind of doughiness. Otherwise, what I like to do is just let them cool completely and then slice it open, toast it, and slather that with some butter, and that is absolutely perfect. We'll just slide these off onto there, slide the paper out. There we go. So now they won't get soggy bottoms. Leave them to cool, and then we'll have a little taste up. Okay, so these have cooled for about 20 minutes now. They're still warm to the touch, but we'll be able to cut into them, have a little look-see and a taste up. The house smells fantastic. Orange, cinnamon, spice, and of course, freshly baked bread. What more could you want? Well, actually, I would have wanted to have proofed these just a little bit longer, just so they had really baked into each other. But on the flip side, we can see that they've all come out very uniform, nice and round, and that is just through good shaping. So do work on that method, that technique of using the palm of your hand and your fingers to create a nice tight ball, because that will help you with any of your rolls, baps, any of those things. So let's have a little look. I'm not going to have that corner one, I'm going to have this one from in here. We will cut it open. There we go. Look at that. Lovely. Nice and light. We've got a few bigger air pockets, but we're not really looking for a sort of really uneven open crumb. We're just looking for a light, even crumb, something you can smear plenty of butter on. I'm going to give that a little taste. Sticky on the outside from the glaze, and such a good flavour. I just love it. And actually, you can really taste that kamut flour. It's lovely. Wholemeal's just as good, but if you can track that down, give it a go, because it really does add something to these buns. But obviously you've got cinnamon, orange, the sultanas, absolutely delicious. That just needs some butter and a cup of tea, and that will be a perfect way to celebrate Easter. Speaking of Easter, as you probably know, we've opened up a little online shop over at buzzbybakes.com, so do check it out. It's not really merchandise, but there's some baking and sourdough inspired gifts, things you might want to buy for yourself. There's a few Easter specials, some cards and a wall print, so do check it out. It's all designed by me and it's all absolutely hilarious. If you've enjoyed this video, do give it a thumbs up. If you've got any comments or questions, leave them below. Please keep subscribing. The channel's growing. It's all thanks to you. Have a very happy Easter. And did I mention we now make tea?